Unit lights on the airways hum. Hear the tales of where they're from. Stories whispered, not in lies. Jobs they held through changing times.
Welcome to Amplify Your Signal, the podcast where we go beyond the resume and share the real stories, struggles, and successes of job seekers, career changers, and professionals navigating the ever-evolving job market. I'm your host, Nicole Roberts, and today we have a fantastic guest joining us, Mark Fagan. I had the privilege of meeting Mark at the Cincinnati HR Roundtable, and I knew that I had to share his story. Mark has had an incredible journey in driving R&D and innovation, and today we'll dive into his career, the value of emotional intelligence in technical roles, and much more. But before we get started, Mark, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to where you are today.
Sure. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. So I'm an engineer by training. I'm a chemical engineer. When I graduated from college, I actually was leaning towards getting an MBA. I thought an engineering degree with an MBA was a really nice combination, but I hadn't had a real job. So I got out, got a full-time job, and I quickly realized I was more interested in the technical side of things. I liked business, but I was more technically oriented. So I went back and got my PhD in chemical engineering and then got a role in product development. So I worked in consumer product development, some business-to-business stuff, which became more in medical devices and then clinical research in drugs and so on. So that's kind of the broad brushstrokes of my career. And it's been a lot of fun. I've done a lot of different things, worked on a lot of different technologies, different projects, wound up leading teams and, doing a lot of new product innovation type of work. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
I think that you've had a fascinating journey, and I know that we're going to get into it. But as you're looking ahead for your next opportunity, what kind of company cultures and organizational values are you looking for?
Yeah, I like companies that pay attention to their culture. So working with some people and they said every company has a culture, whether they work on it or not. So one that really puts people in a place of importance and is also focused on innovation and growth. Those would probably be the things that would be my sweet spots. It's hard to figure that out sometimes, I think, when you're on the applicant side, it's a great place to work. How do they treat people? Sometimes you can find things out, but it's still a little bit of a puzzle to be solved.
Yeah, it definitely can be. One thing that I will do when it comes to trying to suss out that culture is when I'll ask kind of the same question of multiple people that I interact with. And then I also want to find out, does it seem like it's safe to make a mistake around here? Like what is celebrated around here, right? Because if it's just numbers and achievement that's celebrated and not, like you said, you're looking for innovation, right? So if it's not taking chances and trying new things, then it's probably not as supportive of a culture as what I would be looking for or what you would be looking for.
Absolutely.
So something that I really admire about you that I found just kind of interesting and fascinating was how much that you've embraced AI in your career. You saw the industry shifting, you made the decision to dive in and earn multiple certifications in AI. What prompted that decision, and how do you see AI reshaping product development, especially in industries like the, medical devices and pharmaceuticals?
I'm always curious about trends and emerging themes and technology and so on. That goes back to my technical side. And I started seeing more and more about AI. This is probably going back like 5 or 10 years ago, but I started to think it was actually going to be something real and it was going to influence us. And when I was working in a clinical research organization, some of the products and projects we were getting into were touching on AI. And I was also building a team that was doing a lot of writing. So we were taking huge quantities of information and preparing packages to go to the FDA. And so I was kind of thinking about it in two things. Well, how would it affect the way we work? I applied it as a tool because I thought AI might be able to summarize information faster, get us to a first draft faster. So that was kind of internally, but then also the programs that we were getting from clients, especially in radiology, when they were analyzing images, looking for clues or supporting physicians in how they might do diagnostic work. So I was talking with my boss about that, and I was really interested. So I decided just to go out, and I hadn't done, I guess, any computer coding or anything like that since college. I'm not really a coder, but I went online and enrolled in a class and got these certifications, which involved writing in Python and doing these kinds of things where we would do image classification. And I was trying to just demystify it, which it actually did for me, figuring out how language models worked at that point in time. I think they're vastly different today, even just the free ones online like Grok and Copilot and ChatGPT, but just even understanding how they kind of worked and could you trust them or not? Because I think that's a big issue. So, so that's how I kind of got interested in it, decided to go out and figure out what it was actually going to be like and get a little bit more hands-on, get my fingers into it. Yeah. So that's what I did.
Very cool. AI has certainly proven itself to be quite a, game changer. And it's really great that you've been like ahead of that curve in embracing it. I was just on the HR conference cruise speaking on it last week. And one thing that somebody said was, I hope that no matter what you're doing right now, whether you're actively employed or not, that you're learning about AI, that you're at least taking a free class learning about AI, because if you're not, you're going to be left behind. And I think that's incredibly accurate.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to actually be a revolution in a certain sense. I think there's kind of the simple things, which are like digital assistants. You'll see the prompts where it completes sentences and emails. And I think that's just going to happen everywhere. When you put together PowerPoint decks, the kind of Microsoft Office applications you might see, I think that a lot of the stuff that you were talking about with regard to pharma and medical devices is the biggest problem, I think, in the drug side is that there's such a high failure rate. It's millions and millions of candidates, hundreds of thousands, and it goes through. And I think if they can get even a little bit more efficient at that, the success rate will be better. And in medical devices, one of the biggest things that a lot of them are now having software as either part of the product or embedded. And the thing that's kind of really intrigued me is how a layperson can essentially ask AI to generate code. And so you can, even in Excel, you can say, hey, write me a function that takes this column and matches it to that column and produces this, and Copilot will start doing that. Or you can actually get it to write Python code for you, and it can start doing stuff. And so I think that every time that you make it easier to do stuff and it becomes simpler, so there's a learning curve that more people are going to be able to access, analytic tools and software development tools. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to change things. And I think we're all going to be using it. And in some sense, it might replace human beings or it might increase productivity so fewer people can do the same amount of work. But I don't think it's necessarily going to be this horrible thing that some people are forecasting.
Yeah. Like the robots aren't going to come and take all our jobs.
Nah, I don't think the robots are going to take all the jobs, but I think that if you don't have the ability to interact with the robot, like you were saying, you might be left behind a little bit.
Yes. So speaking of humans and not the robots, another thing that I noticed in your spotlight document is your focus on relationships and teamwork. And this really stood out to me as well when I first met you at the round table. I remember you talking about, and I said, man, you don't know how rare it is to have somebody who is a very technical person talking about building strong, cohesive teams. Can you share a story where your focus on relationships really made a difference in your work or leadership?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, let me just talk about that. So I think, like I said, I have a PhD in chemical engineering, which I think carries some baggage because people stereotype. But at the same time, I think people are just people. And I noticed as I was going through my career, there were some people that were really effective and really good leaders, really good managers. And so I always tried to look at that. Even when I would watch somebody who was really good at giving presentations, I'm like, why is he so good at giving a presentation? So I'm always curious as to picking off, like, what are they doing? I might even go ask them, here's my slide deck, what would you do if you were presenting? Because, I've noticed you have these good skills. And as we go through that stuff, I've always thought that technical people are just the same. And so we should be entitled to the same kind of attention to how we work together. Are we collaborative? How are things working as much as any other group? Maybe even more so. And so I've always been really interested in making things work well. Essentially, I've noticed that people who are really good at this, it's almost like you don't notice they're good at it. And so they're kind of no drama.
Yes.
They just are really effective and you don't see them laboring away at it. And so that's kind of actually when I noticed somebody was just doing stuff and it was kind of slipping by me, that's when I actually started paying more attention. So a story I would say is, so I was working at a big pharma company and I was working on an over-the-counter product as a medical device. And I think this would be an example of where, having trust and high-performing teams was a good thing. So there was a technical organization, there was a marketing or commercial organization, and we had a cadence where every other year we would do a commercial innovation, technical innovation, product innovation, commercial, technical, commercial. And it was fairly well mapped out. We knew, how it was going to work. And they came to us, the commercial team came to us and they said, hey, pull one of you. Can you go 2 in a row? Can you go technical and technical? Instead of there being a 2-year gap, there'd be a 1-year gap. So we're going to pull that program forward by a year. And so my boss said, let's brainstorm about it. So he took a couple of days and we thought about it. And then we said, okay, here's what we'll do. And here's how much it's going to cost, because going faster is going to cost. But it comes to, do you have a team that's capable of doing it? Do you have the resources and the bandwidth? And do they trust you that you say you can do something and accelerate at that pace if they pay this much money? And then you'll deliver, right? Because the cycle in the business we were in and what you could, refresh your products on a time scale that matched the retailers. And if you missed that refresh, you didn't get to do it mid-cycle. You had a yearly cadence because that's how the industry, the marketing industry we were working with, especially in Europe, was working. So we did. And so having the relationship where they could ask a question and they trusted you enough to come back and say, yeah, I think we can do it. No, we did. We did do it. It meet our timelines and it was a success all around. But just the ability to have those kinds of what if questions around, I think, shows that they trusted us and we were able to help them out with their plans because they had a little bit more ambition than what they thought they were going to be able to squeeze into that window of time. So it was a win-win.
You can definitely see that trust was there and you can do so much more in a team when that trust is there, especially because like you were saying, right? Be vulnerable with each other and be like, hey, can we actually do this? Is this a possibility? So that's a really great example. Thanks for sharing that. In your time working with regulatory affairs, I'm sure that you face some really high pressure situations. What is one lesson that you've learned from just kind of navigating those that you could apply to any industry or career?
So imagine this. So you have a client, we sometimes call them a sponsor, but they want to initiate a clinical trial. So the step that precedes that is regulatory. So you would submit stuff to, say, the FDA or European agencies. And you would say, here's our plan. Here's why I think it's a good idea. Here's why I think it's safe. And, we would like to be able to give this therapy, say a medication, to a human being and proceed. So you go through the steps to do that. And they want to go through that step as fast as possible. Hit the go button. The problem sometimes is that when you, it's like the house renovation shows, that when you open up the walls, you realize there's an issue. And so it might say, well, this isn't part of the plan or this isn't part of the budget. And then they don't appreciate that also sometimes later on in the cycle, making a decision is not just simply cosmetic. It's more like a structural change to the renovation. And so being able to articulate, is this just changing the paint color or is this moving plumbing, at the end of the project, how that affects it. So we weren't doing a good enough job as a team in explaining how our processes worked internally and why it took us so long to do things and what was easy to make change and what was hard to make change. And so I think that the ability to show them a plan, show them the effects of the decisions that we were making, and then help them understand the ripple effects. Did we have to go backwards and redo work that was already done versus leaving it closed? Because what we tried to do was a lot more sequential building, a lot like renovation, where you do things in a certain order, demo and then rebuilding and then, the finished stuff at the end. So it was a lot more like a construction project than people thought. So being able to articulate that and show that to them and help them understand what the consequences were so they could become part of the problem solving team as opposed to just frustrated with us because we were just people that were just saying no all the time. I think that was a good way to approach it.
Yeah, I agree. I like what you said about kind of making them part of being problem solvers, and you not just being the department of no, because HR can certainly become the department of no. For me as well, I tried to kind of morph into being this person where it might be a no, or it might be a yes, we can do it, but this is what we're going to need to do in order to do it, so that people really understood, like you were saying, these are the different pieces that we're going to have to do in order to be able to do that. Maybe we're not going to be able to move as quickly because of all these other things that are involved. And the more that you're transparent with people and communicate with them, then they trust you. And then they know that, oh, well, you're not just saying no because you don't want to be part of the team and because you don't want to move things forward. There are actual real obstacles at play.
Yeah. But you don't know. Like I wouldn't know. Like I said, hey, you do this, and so I think it's hard because I don't know what your job is and what it's entailed. So also it's a little different when you're in a client service provider relationship because the instinct is that you want to, they're paying you to do stuff, and so it's they tend towards what's rightfully so. They're paying for you for your expertise, and they want to get the stuff done. On the other hand, if their own decisions may be slowing things down or making it more difficult, it has to be more of a relationship as opposed to just hand off and there's arm's length and figure it out.
And you're the expert that they've engaged, right? So if you say that, this is what it's going to take and this is what may cause the delay, then they should be able to trust that and understand that because you're the credible expert that they've engaged with.
Yeah. It's the same thing in engineering or in any of the product development things I worked at. There are things that had long lead times, like if you're or if you're trying to dial in certain things, even simple things people don't understand, like the packaging in a medical device or a pharmacy. So the text, the paper, the carton, all that stuff is very carefully curated, and to change it's actually a big deal. And it's not only just printing the cartons and getting a manufacturer to get it to the manufacturing site, which takes months and months and months. The lead up to it to go through legal review and claims review and medical review to make sure that you're not accidentally doing it. It's fairly well prescribed, but people say, well, you mean I want to just change a word here or there and it could take 9 months? And I'm like, yeah, it could take 9 months. People get just shocked by how long something could take, but then you try and figure out, I hate to be the guy that's always like the party pooper, but that's why I said, if you can bring him in and explain what's going on and figure out how to be part of the problem solving and figure out what can you do and what's easy to do, what's hard to do, and then get to the final state, maybe through a multi-step process as opposed to just, getting there. So, yeah.
So looking ahead, what excites you most about the direction that you're headed in your career? And how do you see your background playing a role in your future opportunities?
Hey, it's Nicole jumping in here for a second. Really loving the trend that is happening here, but I'm really excited to announce that although at the time of taping, Mark was looking for another opportunity, he has since started a new job. And so congratulations to Mark. Super excited to see the trend that is going here, that we now have released 2 episodes, and in both of those episodes that the guest of the podcast has already found a new opportunity. Excited to see more momentum with that, and back to the show.
So we talked a little bit before about how you seem to really value emotional intelligence in your work, and it's something that I think a lot of people overlook, especially in technical roles. How have you seen emotional intelligence make a difference, especially in your field where it's not always obvious? I know we were talking a little bit before we started taping about how, the qualifications for some of these roles are all very, very technical. But then in order to lead teams, Obviously, it takes a whole different skill set.
Yeah, we had a short chat, and I think like you're saying that the technical stuff's the price of entry. Have a certain level of competence to get into a role. But I actually think the whether or not you do well or you deliver results tends to be more around the soft skills or the way that you work, as opposed to just being able to do the basic blocking and tackling of the job. I think it's true at companies across the board. So I've looked like, why is like SpaceX so successful and NASA and Boeing seem to be struggling? And I think the people at SpaceX are vastly more talented, say at NASA or Boeing. I think that the way the company works and its ability to move fast and accept risk and tolerate taking chances and learning fast is what separates them. And I think you see that even in teams, smaller teams in different organizations. And so that's a case where I would say they probably both have about the same playing deck of cards, smart, talented people. It's just that the way that they work, the emotional intelligence it could be, or just even the tolerance and into systems thinking probably differentiates the two organizations. So I think it's the same thing at companies I've worked at. And so there's different cultures, there's different values placed on things. And I also think there is, like you said, some stereotype that technical people are strictly interested in like the numbers and the science or the hard information, which we are interested in. I love the details of that stuff. I love the technology. But it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate, to be successful, that these other things might be overriding that even. And I think that when I look back in programs that start to go sideways or don't pan out, I don't think they usually fail because of purely technical reasons. And so I think that it might be a contributor, but it's not like the only thing. And especially I think when it comes to things that take too long but are ultimately successful, I think they could have been done faster if there had been a different approach and maybe paid more attention to how people work together and how the systems kind of fit. So I'm really interested in that part of being successful as well.
I agree with you. And I also think it is a matter of the leadership and the team believing that their leadership thinks that they can do anything and be successful. When you're working for a leader who, I always said this about my boss, Doug Hoffman at the Care Center. Doug spoke more highly about me behind my back than he even did to my face. And there was nothing that I couldn't do if you just listen to him talk. And he would talk me up in meetings and introduce me to people. And the amount of work that I could get done as a one-person department compared to in other organizations where maybe leadership wasn't as supportive. I've seen that as well with organizations where there were, let's say, like 20 branches. And you'll see the difference in the performance of the different branches strictly based on the way that the leader treats their team and the way that the teams treat each other within the team.
Yeah. And see, like things like that, like the ability to understand how to handle people or praise people or mentor people. So for instance, I don't ever want to correct someone publicly in front of the meeting. Like if they're good or if a phone call didn't go well or presentation or there's just bad stuff, I don't think it's appropriate for a supervisor, even if someone's just like a team lead. They could basically table it, say, hey, can we talk after the meeting? So I always think, praise publicly and correct in private. Those kinds of things, I think, help build trust with your team, like you were saying. And I don't want to give false praise and prevent a false image, but I do think it's disrespectful in a certain sense. As when it happens, sometimes I just wince. So that's like one of those things like, why are these people more effective and how do they interact with people? And just being able to, like you're saying, empower people to do a lot of good things and take a chance and get stuff. That if you're willing to do that and you goofed up, I assume you goofed up every once in a while, but you also knew you're probably going to be trusted. And I'll take the good 99% or 95% and the productivity you're getting as opposed to you operating at a lower level, which is very safe and asking for permission and showing me everything you do. And then your productivity would be down here. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that plays out.
When it comes to giving feedback, there is an art to giving constructive criticism.
I wouldn't say I was very good at it. I'm working on it still.
First of all, you have to you have to have a good frame of reference for the relationship, right? If you build a good relationship with the person, then you know that that person is an ally and they believe in your success. And so they are interested in future success by the constructive criticism that they're providing, the constructive feedback that they're providing. If you didn't take the time to build that relationship and all you're doing is tearing somebody down, you're not going to get any performance out of them because they're not going to trust you. And then you're just going to cause the person to shut down. Also, if somebody does happen to, they say that it's losing your temper because you are losing control of yourself and your behavior and your words. And I had somebody call me and they said, I made a really big mistake. And I said, what'd you do? And they said, I lost my temper in a meeting and I took it out on somebody that was in the room. And he said, I'm going to let everybody kind of cool off and sleep on it. And then I'll talk to him in the morning. And I said, call him tonight because he has left the meeting, gone home, talked to his friends, families, loved ones, whatever, about this terrible experience that he had. And you can reach out and let him know that you recognize that you did not show up the way you wanted to and that you care about the relationship. I said, do not let both of you sleep on it before that. I said, and then the second part of what you have to do, because it was very public where you lost your temper, I said, the second part of what you have to do is then you have to go back into that same group of people and you need to publicly apologize because it was not right what you did.
Yeah.
Well,
how did it play out?
So he called me back and he said, well, I knew that I had to do that. And I'm glad that you told me to do that. And he said, and the guy did thank him. He said, I really appreciate that. And I know I've been working with you for a long time. And I know that wasn't easy for you to do. And he said, yeah, but it wasn't your fault. I was already kind of thinking about some other stuff and some other pressures. And I took it out on you and I shouldn't have. And the team really noticed that he was trying to do better. And teams that see a leader that's trying, I mean, they will outperform every time.
I think the attitude and effort, like you're saying, is also probably more important than actual results in some case. I mean, you have to get results, but if I know that you're trying and you're doing your best and we're not getting there, that's probably a big difference than, half-hearted and so on. Yeah. So I think that the effort and the attitude towards the program is a lot of stuff. Yeah. It's kind of funny. I had people where I remember one story where I had a person I was managing did something extremely efficiently and kind of let the cat out of the bag inadvertently. So she asked on a project to do something, turned it around real fast, and the person who was in charge of it, it's a little more important than this, what I'm describing, but it was, the information was supposed to come out the next day. So she was terrified that she had overstepped her bounds and made a big error and everything else and was in tears. And I was like, hey, that's not a big deal. This is fine. You're just super efficient. People don't understand that sometimes people get stuff done that fast and they should have been more explicit than things, and we can work through this and there's consequences. And because this had to do with clinical research, there were some other consequences that made it a little bit trickier. But I remember that. And some people think they're going to get fired when they make that kind of a mistake. And I'm like, no, you got something done. So let's go. This will be okay. And so I think that kind of a thing with calming down and it'll be okay because they're 10 employees and they haven't screwed up enough. And they need to learn that it's okay, like you're saying, to make a mistake every once in a while. And it was a mistake that was done. The work was all done properly. It was just done faster than anyone expected. So how do you fault that?
So looking back on your career, what do you think has been the key to your success, both professionally and personally? What's something that you're really proud of that doesn't show up on your resume?
Yeah, I think that, I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, I think that from a professional standpoint, I'm good at asking the right question or getting to the right question and solving the right problem. And so I think that's been a real big benefit. I think that just in general, though, I basically am a trustworthy guy. And so I think if you can't trust your coworkers or trust your familial members, then you have a problem. So I think I'm worthy of trust and I'm able to generate trust with my colleagues and so on. So I think that establishing trust is probably the biggest thing you want to accomplish. And then you can get after that. I would say that that's impossible to know from a resume. Can I trust this guy? I think when you hire in, getting back to your thing, like it's not on your resume. How would you know? And you have these half-hour interviews or hour interviews, even video interviews, as opposed to a face-to-face interview. I think that's the vibe you're trying to pick up, isn't it? Really? Can he do the job? Can I trust him? Those are the basic questions you're getting at. Or what would he be like over a period of time? Would I want to work with him multiple times on multiple projects over a span of time? And that kind of gets at trust. I mean, I don't think people necessarily like their coworkers. It's nice if they do, but they want to trust them. I think it's the same thing when you hire someone to do something, or a doctor or anything else. I don't know that I need to like my plumber, but I certainly want to trust the plumber. So yeah, those kinds of questions I don't think are ever on a piece of paper.
Yeah. I think that's incredibly powerful. And it's true. Through all of your interview process, you meet all the people, and then, they get together and they do a debrief. And that is the crux of it, right? Is, do we believe the person can do the job? Are we going to enjoy working with the person? Are we going to trust them to take care of, this aspect of the job or the project or the organization or the service, and also to represent us while they're doing it? So yeah, I think that's incredibly important.
And what's funny is most people, if they hire in an organization, probably aren't going to be in that job or that specific role for a long, long period of time. So if they're going to pick up new responsibilities or move around a little bit or do new initiatives as they come along, the skill set becomes less important. Like, have they done this particular thing, this particular thing, this particular thing? And it comes down to more the ability to work with them on an ongoing basis and to adapt to new things. So yeah, that's what's also interesting about the whole, you're hiring into a very specific skill set, a very specific position, but the long term is probably going to be a little bit different than that in that particular role you're getting your foot in the door with.
So a lot of people are looking to either pivot or level up in their careers. What advice would you give to somebody who wants to grow their skill set or transition into something new, especially an example, an industry that's constantly evolving, like what you have done with product development?
Yeah, I would say go for it. I mean, why not? I think that, like you were talking about at the beginning with that AI, we all have to be continuous learners and we have to keep leveling up our skills. I mean, my generation, my first job, I didn't have a computer on my desk. There was no PC. And so, then adapting through PCs and emails, getting all with smartphones and AI and everything else. I think that I'm used to the change, and I think you should embrace it, and it's a condition of the world that we live in. And I think that most people I run into, there's also another stereotype that the younger people are really good at technology and the older people aren't. And I don't know that I buy that. I think that there might be some truth about that because we think of our parents or we think about other people like that. But I've noticed that people are pretty open to engaging with new technology and figuring out new skills and new things. I don't think people want to go back to rotary phones. I don't hear anyone talk. So it's working. I would say go for it. And I think that the other thing is that, and I'm thinking about this more, like, I think that there might not be enough upskilling or continuing education in the workforce. And I think employers maybe should think about that. And also people should maybe do it a little bit on their own, because being forced into it or learning it kind of on the fly maybe isn't the best way. And if a company wants to, get some new skill into their set, I think the training maybe should be a little bit more of a focus.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I am a person who am constantly learning new things. And I've got bookshelves full of, literally 2 rows are just my leadership and business and HR books. And I've got maybe 5 or 6 fiction things over. That has always been the way that I've approached things. And I love what I do so much that I'm constantly learning more about it. And it frustrated me at first when I would come in contact with people in the workplace that were just kind of like, I don't know, I work here because I've got bills to pay and I clock out and I go home and I don't think about anything else for the rest of the day. And I'm like, what? Like, I drove into work thinking about how I'm going to solve the problem that I've been thinking about. You know what I mean? I just live, eat, and breathe so much of what I do and how I show up and what I'm interested in, like learning about the podcast, right? I didn't know anything about it. I'm still not an expert, but it fascinated me, the people that could be just content, and they really seem to be content with not doing anything more. And then I would come in contact with the people who were like, well, do you have a book that I can learn more about that? Or is there a podcast? Or is there a, like an audio book? Or is there a seminar I can go to or something? Those people I have always seen will be more successful because I'm not content with just either the status quo or letting that be the end of it. If they came to a roadblock, they wanted to learn more and they wanted to break through it. And I have always been impressed with that. And I've always surrounded myself with people that were continuous improvement and continuous learning and trying to challenge each other to be better. And not from a pure like competition standpoint. I mean, I think that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you mean, not building upon each other in a positive way, as a collaborative way, opposed to a win-lose way. Yeah. But I know what you're talking about. It's kind of a mindset, and I'm with you. And I don't think you age out of it. I don't think that just because you're 40 or 50 or 60 and you want to learn new things, I don't think that goes away. But I'm with you. I don't think it's a healthy mindset to just say, I'm not going to change. This is the way we've always done it. And we all probably get in a rut. Like being on this podcast, not my sweet spot. I don't like talking about myself. I don't like doing this kind of stuff. But like, hey, you invited me, and I thought I better do stuff. This is podcast. This is what people do. Maybe I need to get out there and do a little bit more of this stuff. So in a way, it's a challenge and it's an adventure. So I said, okay, I'll do it. But you know what I'm talking about. Even this is hard for me. It is, I don't want to look goofy on the internet. And then.
Yeah. Apparently some people do though, because they make millions of dollars off of it, but not me and not you for sure. So before we wrap up, I want to close with some rapid fire questions. I actually got this idea from, Kirsten Gregg on the Trap Recruiter podcast has these rapid fires. And I was like, oh, what a cool idea, because it gets kind of that like informal stuff. It's not just about your journey and your career. And it's a good way, I think, for people to connect and to, kind of relate. So first of all, coffee or tea to get you through the day. First, is there a caffeinated beverage, or are you like, nope, I just drink water? Like, what's your thing?
So both. I do both.
Okay.
This is tea. Tea's my favorite. So have a daughter that got me some loose leaf tea. So I've started doing that a little bit on the journey of becoming a tea snob. So I do both.
So
But
when you
tea's
do
my
the
favorite.
loose leaf tea, do you have like the little thing that has the silicone kind of stopper and you steep it into the hot water? Is that what you're doing? Or do you have like the whole...
A mesh ball, circle thing, sphere. And then she got me like a sampler. There's a place in Hyde Park. And so she gave me some black tea, and you put in black or green or oolong or all this kind of stuff. And then actually have to do it at different temperatures. I didn't know that. So green tea is different than oolong's different than anyway. And then you do it and you try it. And I don't do the cream and sugar thing like the Brits do. I just do straight tea. So yeah, it's a little bit of an adventure. Kind of enjoying it.
What is your go-to productivity hack or something that really helps you stay on track?
I think the one I picked up a long time ago is don't do email all day. So in the morning and then after lunch, focus on it. And if you have to pay attention to it, but constantly getting distracted by email and trying to answer emails instantly. Did you see that email? Did you see that email? I'm like, no. They're like, why not? I'm like, I'm not checking my email because I need a block of time. So I don't remember where I learned that one from. That was a long time ago, but that seems to work for me. If I keep getting day chopped up it's hard for me to be as productive as I want to be.
I know something that was a game changer for me was back, and this was years ago, when Outlook first started to introduce the concept of the focus time where you could block out your calendar automatically. That was a game changer for me. And also I would schedule my email time as well so that it was intentionally blocked out. Very similar.
So
yeah,
you're
because
similar.
otherwise people will treat email like it's a freaking Teams message or like an instant message. I'm like, I can't just chat back and forth with you all day on an email. Like, call me if you need to, right? So yeah, I agree with you on that. You have to recommend just one book to anyone listening. What's that going to be?
I'm like you. I have fun books and I have like not like business books or whatever you want to call it. So I'll give you two answers. So I'd say for fun books, I like the Pray series by John Sanford. So it's about pops up in Minnesota. I used to live there, so I like those. From a workbook, or at least from a job seeker book, Nailed It by Matthew Marvin. It's a book about doing well in interviews. That's right. That's probably my favorite of that genre.
Okay. What is the most useful feedback you've ever received, and what did you do about it?
Yeah. So going back to the management stuff or leading teams and stuff, too sedate. Don't celebrate, acknowledge, thank people enough. Probably don't do that all in my life. Motivating people, a lot of it has to do with recognition and reward beyond just money. And so just learning about that and how to show appreciation for what people do, I think was super important. I'm still probably not great at it, but at least I'm aware it's not one of my strengths. So
I'm going to give you a life hack for your next position. So when you get in your next role, and you're going to tell me about it because we're going to stay in touch. When you meet your new team, I want you to send them a message, and I want you to ask them what is most impactful for them in forms of recognition. So do they like public praise? Do they like private praise? And then ask them what their favorite restaurant, store, like hobbies, that kind of thing. Because then when you get in the opportunity where you can surprise somebody with recognition, you already know the things that are going to be most impactful to them and that they like. So if somebody says, oh, I love coffee, I'm a Starbucks junkie. Okay, well, now I know that a Starbucks gift card would be a good idea, or like a mug with stuff in it. And then also knowing the difference between whether or not people like to be publicly praised or not, because some people don't. And you can really erode the relationship if they don't like that, and that's all you do.
Right.
It's very important.
That's important. Yeah, that's a good thing. What's the best style for that? And that's the other thing I would talk about, is that we all have different things that we like. Like some people like to be instant message, some people like to be emailed, some people like to be texted. And so I try to adapt the communication style that I use to the best, but also think about that in terms of the praising style or recognition style. Yeah.
I always share with people, this is the most successful form of communication with me. And then I want to know their most successful form of communication. Well, Mark, thank you so much. This has been such an insightful conversation, and I'm sure our listeners are going to walk away with a lot of valuable takeaways from your experience. And obviously, we're going to share your information in the show notes so that people can get a hold of you. Where can they connect with you or learn more about your work?
I would say I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to get up with me. So my name's Mark Fagan, Fagan. If anyone wants to shoot me a message or reach out, I'd be happy to receive it.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again, Mark. And thank you to our listeners for tuning into this second episode of Amplify Your Signal. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. We will be back next week with more inspiring stories.
Pages blank, but hearts alive. Through their journeys, they still strive. Tales of passion, grit, and grace. Every journey